Martina and I first met when both of us were engaged at the Zurich Opera House in Switzerland. And I had the great pleasure of being assigned to direct a new production of Verdi's Il Trovatore. And Martina was Leonora. I had heard about Martina, but I didn't know her. But it was, I tell you, it was love at first sight. It really was, because Martina was, is, and will be. She's really like a kind of a warm ray of sunshine, whatever she does. But she's an incredible combination of a real solid artist with this fabulous sense of humor and very down to earth. So we got along, and our tenor also was wonderful with James McCracken. So when we rehearsed, it was all work. Martina sang gloriously, and she's a real Verdi soprano with that wonderful cantabile lines and the top to the bottom, all one line. And James McCracken was wonderful. So we would have these great rehearsals, and then once we broke and we took some time off, she was hysterical. She had the greatest sense of humor. But the story that I want to tell about Martina, because it happened in this Trovatore, we had a different intendant, the general director of the Zurich Opera House. We were used to the one before, who was a wonderful gentleman. But this gentleman was a Viennese who was very conservative. Her Professor Juch would come, and he then sent a memo down to the costume shop that, you know, there's a scene when Leonora, thinking that Manrico is dead, she wants to join the convent. And so she goes to take the veil. And there's a beautiful scene, and then Manrico shows up, and of course she doesn't take the veil. And so, Professor Juch sent this memo that he wanted Miss Martina Arroyo look like Jackie Kennedy when Jackie Kennedy went to visit the Pope in Vatican. And of course, you know, at an opera house, I mean, it's a little village, so rumors and all, and somebody must have told Martina that about this memo. And when I got this memo, I mean, it's a ridiculous memo, you know. So Martina went up to Professor Juch's office and went right in and sat. It's a Professor Juch, and she said, Professor Juch, I understand that you think that when, as Leonora, I go to the convent, you want me to look like Jackie Kennedy when she went to visit the Pope in the Vatican. Well, I can't. I can't look like Jackie Kennedy, but Jackie Kennedy can't sing Leonora. So Professor Juch then was being very diplomatic and said, well, Miss Arroyo, there's some people think that you shouldn't even sing Leonora. And Martina, without batting an eyelash, said, well, Professor Juch, a lot of people think you should run an opera company. So, of course, that story got... So anyway, we've stayed friends from then on. We worked on other things. And because it's this wonderful combination of this gorgeous gift, excellent musician, solid technique, and a very committed actress. And she is very intelligent. Sometimes that intelligence is not that obvious because she's got such a great sense of humor, you know, and all that. And I think she got it from her mother. I met her mother. She was a wonderful lady, down to earth, solid. They lived in Zurich at that time when we were all kind of all from the United States, and we would kind of stick together. But then later on, I worked with her in Geneva, also for other productions. And then when I was the general director of the Canadian Opera Company in Toronto, then of course I invited her, and I did it, especially a new production of Masked Ball for her, because as I said, Martina was a real Verdi, what they call a category, a Verdi soprano, kind of spinto lyrico. She had it all. And then the thing also was fun, then she had never done Turandot. And I knew that she had the strength and she had all the notes and all that. So I asked her, I said, Martina, would you like to do your first Turandot? And she came, and we mounted a Turandot for her and all that. So we've been friends ever since. And I always loved and admire her because of this combination of intelligence, good, solid technique, but very, very strong, but strong in the most positive way. and an incredible sense of humor that I think she got some of it from her mother. And I don't know, people know that much. I mean, she was one of the favorite guests for Johnny Carson, that he would then interview her and all that. And she always had one of the funniest intermission programs was once with her, Martina, Joan Sutherland, and Marilyn Horne. And the tape of that has become a collector's item because this lady knows how to puncture balloons. You know. Anyway, so that's my love for Martina. And I'm very proud of what she's doing now with the young artists. She's dedicated, she's a wonderful teacher, solid, because she brings knowledge and technique, but with warmth and compassion and understanding, because she's been there. She's been there herself, and so she can then pass out the torch to the young people and provide them the understanding that this is not an easy career. It takes a great, great deal. It takes solidity, it takes a technique, it takes a musicality and all that. It's a very complex talent, and Martina has it. Martina has a wonderful way of connecting with the audience because she's so committed. She's so involved what she does. Like, there's a wonderful aria in Mass Ball where then Emilia is begging because the husband has decided then to kill her because he's discovered infidelity and all that stuff. But Martina was so moving in that aria. So it was unbelievably moving that I was the stage director and she would move me, you know. And so the audience loved her. The audience loved her because she could connect, you know, and they understood her because she was strong enough in her technique that she could get involved dramatically, you know, and then become the character, and then make every second count. And then what Martina had, which was great, she had this communication with the audience. She could communicate. What is theater and opera anyway? It is communication. You know, you want to get the audience involved. And I think Martina had that ability in whatever she did, even in Turandot, which is a very complicated role. Very complicated. People don't understand how complicated that is, because there she is, this cruel princess that has to all of a sudden order the death of this, you know, this poor slave girl who, by the way, that Liu can always steal the opera with her two arias, you know. But Martina, what was wonderful then, when Turandot then is kissed by Karloff, and all of a sudden all her defenses break and all that, Martina could do that. In a very short period of time, all of a sudden you saw that all her strength, and it was defensive. It was her fear. And once then she realized she was in love, then she made that wonderful transition. All of a sudden she became a young girl. It was not this majestic princess, cold and frightened, because Turandot's problem is she's scared. And Martina could bring that out. And that's what I loved. And I was delighted that she was doing it the first Turandot with me. I think everybody says that Turandot is a killer role for soprano. It really depends how you do it. It depends that how you, first of all, that you have to have the vocal technique, but also Turandot have some gorgeous lyrical. And the last duet and all that, it's just beautiful. And Martina had the technique that she wasn't screaming. She was singing, you know, and she was projecting in that duet. And I think it was a good role for her. I felt that it was a good role. It's a difficult role, you know, and a lot of sopranos, of course, Nielsen, the very first Turandot I ever directed was Brigitte Nielsen, you know. She called that role her vacation role, you know. So, but other lyric sopranos, Joan Sutherland, you know, I tried it, you know, and on the recording, never on stage, never on stage. I would describe Martina's voice as like chocolate cream. that you've got wonderful cream mixed with this wonderful chocolate. It's delicious, and it just kind of flows. So I mean, if I want to explain, that would be the way I would explain that. It's a lovely sound, but she had the capacity and capability of giving the power, but at the same time doing the only role that I was hoping to do with her. We never got a chance to do it because I thought she could have been a fantastic Norma, because she had all the vocal stuff, yet she had the kind of the warmth and that fabulous vulnerability that the character needs. And so that, but somehow there was a misunderstanding about whatever dates and all that stuff. We never got a chance to do that. I think she would have been a wonderful Norma. For me, for Martina going to teaching was not a surprise at all, because she is a real communicator. Martina communicates. She can talk beautifully, she can express her thoughts very logically, very, very clearly and all that. She doesn't go airy-fairy, you know, for some of the teachers, you know, like I know some vocal teachers that talk, oh, my dear, singing is like stringing pearls, you know, and all that nonsense, you know. But she deals in actual technical stuff, and she's a communicator. I mean, you've heard her talk. She talks beautifully. When she gets up in front of an audience and all that, she is a very, very expressive person, and she talks very well. And she was always like that. And I could imagine that she would be a very, very good teacher. And she has, of course, like all good teachers, need a good sense of humor. You've got to, so that because the students are so insecure and so vulnerable. And I have a feeling Martina knows how to make them relax, you know, to make them kind of calm down in order to get their best out of them. Because she's not a person that would intimidate. She's not. Because her warmth and humor, I bet anyone, because that she makes the students relax, because she knows that that's when they can do their best. She had a wonderful sense of humor, because you always say that a lot of the singers, the operatic singers, sometimes they don't know what they're saying. And one of the funniest rehearsals I ever had with her in Trovatore was again at this convent scene. And there's a wonderful, when Manrico arrives, and of course Leonora is completely surprised, because she's delighted she doesn't know, and that Verdi has written a wonderful music. And I think as a joke, there's a kind of a halting phrase. And then she says, if you, it looks as if you came from the heavens and all that. And in one of the run-throughs and the orchestra rehearsals, Jamie McCracken, who was a very large gentleman who was also a wonderful artist, he arrived, and of course everything stops. The chorus stops, super stop, and all that. And there's Martina. And then she said, completely gestures different. She said, if you came from heaven, and then Jimmy McCracken, who's got back to the audience, this enormous man, all of a sudden you saw the body going, trying not to laugh. And I always remember that because it was hysterical. All of us were just breaking up. C'est tout, dame, duce. So that, I remember that. And there are many stories. One time in Salzburg, one fan saw Martina during a festival and ran over to her. Oh, Madame Price, I've been such a fan of yours, thinking that Martina was Leontine Price. Martina, without batting an eyelash, she said, I'm not Leontine Price, I'm Riri Grist. And Riri was a coloratura soprano. Just, she's so sharp and she's so fast. So that's what I loved about her sense of humor. She's just right there. She made it her own, these roles. But first of all, she never copied anybody. She never copied anybody. And also what was very important for her, she was one of the very few of these great, you know, spinto sopranos who really cared about the text. Because she knew that the text was the fountain where the music came from. because the composers start with the libretto first. So that's why she was such a good communicator, because she would use the text to motivate the musical line. You know, and that, of course, made the musical line much more meaningful rather than just sounds. You know, and I think that's how she would act the roles that she did. You know, whether it was Elizabeth and Don Carlos, or whether it was Leonora, or, you know, Amelia and all these things. She just made it her own because she went back to the source. She went to the text that had inspired the composers to pick the notes for those words. So at that, I think that's how then she was, you know, and she was not one of these singers that was what we call them the windmill style of singing, you know, the hands all going all the time. It was contained, but it was kind of controlled, but very expressive, because then you became involved in her face. You were not being distracted by unnecessary body language about movements and all that, which didn't mean anything. They were empty. You know what I mean? Because a lot of singers do many gestures because they're nervous. And actually, all of a sudden, the arms, the hands, have a life of their own. You know, and they go there and you think, what is it? Is it a sailor making signals, or what is it? You know, so, but Martina, because she associated the notes with the words and tag, so she communicated it, and you didn't need all this extraneous, you know, unnecessary movements, you know, which didn't mean anything, because one of the greatest force and presence on the stage is to stand still. Well, her legacy is really what she's doing now with the young artist, in a sense, because she's passing on the torch. I think all of us in this profession, our hope and desire is that we can make a difference by passing on to the new generation the knowledge and the love, the passion for our art form. And I think Martina's legacy is this passion she had for her profession, which she's giving to all these young people right now. And she has to, and also, let me remind you, she's got to work like hell to raise the money, to go to these fundraisers, all these galalas, and all, you know, all of that stuff. That is an incredible amount of work, but she's very good at it. She's very good at it. She raises the money, because without that money, without those funds, she couldn't have her program. And she works beautifully on that, and she makes sure, because of the young singers, she does all that work, you know, because she wants to give these kids their, you know, the torch for their future. Martina's mother was very supportive, very, very supportive. I don't know way earlier, but I only met her in Zurich when they came over and Martina was there. And she was unbelievably supportive, but also her mother was so down to earth. When we go to a restaurant or something like that, absolutely no pretensions. And I think that's where Martina got it from. That wonderful sense of humor and that kind of honesty. Because I remember her, because in our profession especially, there's so much baloney, you know, all that stuff. But not her mother. Not her mother. Her mother was incredibly, because one of the most wonderful story about her mother was, when Martina at the Old Met got a chance to make her debut singing Elsa in Lohengrin. And so Martina's representative then took Martina to see this performance of Martina doing Elsa Lohengrin. And as you know, the end of the second act is the wedding. Elsa marries Lohengrin. So Mrs. Arroyo then got up and said, okay, that was a good performance, let's go home. And this representative says, but oh no, Ms. Arroyo, there's a third act. She said, well, didn't they just get married? And so finally, they said, all right. So they went back for the third act. And then at the end of it, as you know what happens then, when the swan comes, and then Lohengrin has to get the swan and leave Elsa and all that. So Mrs. Arroyo goes to Martina's dressing room and says, well, honey, What do you expect for a guy who's got a plucked duck for a friend?